what we are seeing these days is a signal change in the behavior of Europe. Europe has finally come to terms with history after a phase where it lived in post-history, as if world leaders are all gentlemen that you can reach with them understandings through negotiations. I think that Putin's contribution to change the mind of Europe is this invasion of Ukraine. The UK is a case apart. UK has a military tradition and a different attitude. This explains this sea change in the behavior of Europe. And the reason was not, the fact that Europe didn't go into NATO in a more assertive way doesn't have to do only with Trump. It started even before. During the Obama administration, there was a lot of criticism at Europe for not investing the 2% of GDP in NATO, etc. But Putin changed all of this. And then you have the definition, how Europe defines itself. It has to do with the question of accession of the West Balkans. In the mental map of Europe, the West Balkans is a periphery. It's a periphery that doesn't belong to the core of the European Union. And I think it was President Macron who wrote or spoke about what he called concentric circles of Europe, where it is not official policy, but it is a mental attitude. And it is the conflict, it is the crisis that changes or perhaps speeds up in a way the possibility of accession. It took only weeks for Europe to declare the Ukraine and Moldova as possible candidates, whereas in the West Balkans, it hasn't created a sufficient level of instability and threat for Europe to be much more resolute in the process of accession. Bear in mind also, if I may, that Europe is divided not only about the mechanisms at which Mr. Scholz was very eloquent on that, and it was extremely interesting, but it is also on substantive issues it is divided. There is a difference between the West, say France, Spain, Portugal, now Italy because of change of government as well. For them, Ukraine is not the main problem. The Mediterranean, illegal immigration, the Sahel, Morocco, Algeria, these are the strategic problems. And therefore, my question is, and I rather wonder, is really Europe capable of sustaining the war in Ukraine with the billions of dollars that this requires monthly, sometimes even daily, until the Ukrainians recover all their sovereign land, and at the same time carry on its back the Herculean financial burden of incorporating into the European Union the entire West Balkan, Moldova, Ukraine, etc., and sustain the war with Putin for a long time, because Putin is going nowhere. I wonder. And this explains why countries like China penetrate the region by exploiting the ambiguities of Europe, the ambiguities of the West. This is where Russia, or particularly in terms of economic development, the Chinese. Now we'll have to see what is the end game with Russia. I am very much preoccupied, I'm very much worried by the fact that the West doesn't have a clear idea what to do with this war. Where is this war going to end? Kissinger told us that in 2014, with the Crimean crisis, that the question is how it ends, not how it begins. When the war started, Biden was very much worried by the fact that, Putin doesn't have an exit strategy. What is Biden's exit strategy? Just weakening Russia? How do you quantify this? What does it really mean? So I think that we need some diplomacy urgently. Urgently because also China is changing. China is changing, giving now priority to national security issues over economic questions. Maybe the Chinese will go now or are already in the middle of an economic crisis. You can't publish anymore the GDP in China because it isn't going to be very convincing. But national security has become uppermost or the main item. And in national security, there is no longer peaceful rise. The legacy of Deng Xiaoping is dead. Now we have a new Mao Zedong. How is the United States going to deal with it? Is the United States, contrary to previous strategic advisors, going to take on at the same time China and Russia and the disruptive, revisionist Russia, that with president, whenever he goes into difficulties, his option is to escalate. He escalates. He doesn't go down. I mean, he doesn't retreat. So I think we need to take Putin more seriously. It's not a question just of us judging his behavior. We all agree that we have here a criminal revisionist. Now the question is, how do we deal with it? And I think that we need some piece of diplomacy from the West, which is absent right now. And I hope it happens as soon as possible. With regard to the West Balkans, they have done, many of them, we heard Kosovo, we know about North Macedonia. They have done their homework mostly. And we need to think, the leaders of the West, not just, I mean, democracy is the best system that we can, with all its imperfections, but we need to think also about order. Order and democracy, to try and find a wise balance. Sometimes you can find order even without democracy. It was the West, it was President Biden that decided that the current conflict is between democracy and autocracy. Just as during the days of the Soviet Union, two ideologies. I think that we need to strengthen our democracies at home, and abroad we should not be about exporting democracy, but putting the emphasis on order, on a system of order. Vučić, the president of Serbia, is a disruptive authoritarian. So is Milorad Dodik in Republika Srpska. But you have done an excellent job in trying to find accommodations. 2013, you had the Brussels Agreement, where they didn't recognize the moral existence of Kosovo, or the moral justification, but yes, the political institutions, and they are ready to collaborate with the political institutions. You know, we had peace with Egypt on the same line. The Egyptians doesn't accept the moral existence, the moral reason for the existence of a Jewish state, but the reality. Our problem with the Palestinians is that it is moral, that we address moral questions. We are a country that was born in sin, according to the Palestinians, and it's a very difficult problem. But once you turn it into an institutional issue, into a strictly political issue, which is what you wisely did with the Serbs, you can find accommodation and develop your country and not try to change them. Maybe something inside will happen that will change them, as what we saw with the Soviet Union. At the end of the day, state building, the philosophy of state building of the United States failed resoundingly. Freedom House has just published the report, the annual report, about the increase worldwide of authoritarianism. So we need to strengthen our democracy at home. If what happened on 6th January 2021 in Capitol would have happened in an African country, or perhaps in Kosovo, the UN would have sent a delegation to put your house in order. So we need to start strengthening democracy at home. Let's be worried about democracy in China and other places, and try to push the emphasis on reaching workable settlements, not for a universal peace, but perhaps for peace in our time. Thank you.